there are plenty of instances where I screwed up. I'll be the first one to admit it.
Sean Spicer in studio. Tonight, the former White House press secretary talks politics, the press, and his time in the Trump administration.
That's not how our democracy is supposed to work.
A diatribe against the GOP, former President Barack Obama's message ahead of the midterm elections. And fact-checking claims about flag burning and wealth. We're putting the U.S. Senate candidates to the PolitiFact Texas Truth-O-Meter. Capital Tonight starts right now. Thanks for joining us here on Capital Tonight. I'm Karina Kling. He was the first press secretary of the Trump White House. He tussled often with the press. He messed up and admits it. And he was in Texas today touting his new book that highlights his time in the Trump administration. I sat down with former White House press secretary Sean Spicer this afternoon to talk Trump, that scathing New York Times op-ed, and much more. Take a look. Mr. Spicer, thanks so much for being on the program.
Thanks
Welcome
for having
to Texas.
Good to be here.
Good to have you in town. I want to start with your book because you detail kind of some of what started the problems with your time in the White House. President Trump not happy with the publicity about the Inauguration Day pictures, the photos that were out there, the crowd size, wanted you to get out in front of this. And then you said this.
This was the largest audience to ever witness an inauguration, period, both in person and around the globe. So
you knew that wasn't true. Why did you say it?
Well, look, I think, part of the reason I wrote the book is so that I could actually walk through what was going on behind the scenes, what the thinking was. As I've said multiple times since then, if I could have one day to do over in my life, I think that's number 1, 2, and 3. It's both in terms of like the tone and how we constructed that. That's obviously not something that I would I'm excited to keep watching over and over again. Look, I've said it before. I don't think that I did an effective job trying to communicate. We were frustrated with some of the pettiness of the coverage and tried to make a case about the interest and excitement and enthusiasm that existed and say, okay, well, it's not just about the number of people on the mall. It's about all these people watching it online. And as I've said, just a moment ago, I think that there was no question that that was not an effective way to communicate that point, and I think that, frankly, we made way too much of it than we should have.
Was Trump pushing you to say those words?
No. I talk extensively in the book about how that all came to be, and the bottom line is that the night before, which was our first day in office, at the first press spray where the press had come in, they had falsely accused the president of removing the bust of Martin Luther King. Then we go out after we clean that up all night, and then the next segment on these cable news programs, a couple of them were talking about, that no one was at the inauguration, it wasn't that well attended. And I think there was a level of, you've got to be kidding me. Like, we're 24 hours in, and already the coverage is just petty and nitpicky. And so he was like, look, we got to get out there and get this straight. And I took it upon myself, as I've noted multiple times, to try to build an effective case. Clearly that didn't work.
Well,
and just I apologize, but he he was not happy with that.
Well, I was going to say that. Trump, you mentioned in the book that Trump was not happy with you about that you thought maybe your first day might be your last.
Yeah.
What happened in that conversation?
Well, I walked back into the press secretary's office, and the phone rings. It's the president. He was just like, what was that? And part of the mistake that I made, if the list is kind of long that day, but was that I didn't sit down and go to the president and say, okay, this is, you wanted to go out there and set the record straight. This is how I'm going to do it. I took it upon myself to say, okay, this is the case I'm going to make. And I think that he didn't like the tone and the tenor and some of the examples and what the focus was. So I really worried that day was going to be my last. And I think, to your point, and the reason that you're playing the clip is that it really set the tone for a lot of things to come, which I don't think was a helpful first step.
Well, for you, there have been a lot of mistruths said along the way from President Trump himself as well. But with your daily meetings with him and kind of, trying to back up some of what he's saying, what is that like?
Well, I mean, I think part of it is with any principal that you work with, trying to figure out what's the tone, tenor, message that they want to get out, and then how are they sort of substantiating that. And so what I would do sometimes is say, okay, what is it that you're actually trying to achieve, and let's figure out, you know, and also there were times when if the question was, does he believe X, or he'd say, you know, this is what I believe. And so it's a question of communicating his thoughts and beliefs, not necessarily trying to do what you want to do. That's not really the role of the press secretary.
What if you know those beliefs are inaccurate, though?
Well, again, if there's someone's beliefs and their views, if they believe something and you explain it, I mean, what I would do privately is to explain to the president, hey, look, if this is what you want to say your belief is, I think here's how we're going to get challenged. This is what folks are going to say. I would give him my private advice and counsel. And, you know, sometimes he would say, that's a good point. I didn't see it from that particular angle. I get that you think that this would be more effective. Sometimes we'd say, look, if people are asking what my view is, this is my view.
Did you ever try to push back on some of the things that were being said that you knew would be misstatements?
Sure, but again, I think that that's the job, is to privately go in and make sure that the person that you work for understands the implications of the message or of the narrative that they want to get out in the way that they do. And part of your job is to say, I get where you want to go. Here might be a more effective way of doing it.
You have gotten some criticism for how the book leaves out a lot, that it's a defense of you, a defense of President Trump. What's your reaction to that?
I think it depends on who you are. I've been really pleased with the reaction from a lot of folks. It's my story, it's my life, and my views. I think there are people who want me, just like they did in the press secretary's job, they want me to say things that they believe or that how they think I should feel. But I think it's a very candid look at who I am. I think, as you brought up, there's a lot of the issues where I stepped in it, and I think I'm pretty candid in saying, this is what happened, this is why it happened, here's how I would have done it differently, here's what the intention was. But I think that for the most part, the reaction that people that I've met, whether it's in an airport or just down the street, will say, they really enjoyed it. It gives people two big perspectives. One, on who I am as a person and how I got the position I did. But secondly, is I think it really goes back and fills in a lot of the behind-the-scenes moments from the campaign and the convention and things like that. I get that there are people, I mean, the critique that I've gotten a lot is, well, you didn't include X. Well, it's my book.
Well, sure. I want to talk about another book that's getting quite a bit of attention. Journalist Bob Woodward, soon to be released, Fear Trump in the White House. An excerpt obtained by some media outlets says that Defense Secretary James Mattis reportedly lashed out at you for repeatedly trying to get him to go on TV. And I quote, "Sean, I've killed people for a living. If you call me again, I'm going to effing send you to Afghanistan." Did that happen?
I've never called the Defense Secretary.
You never?
No.
You never told him to go on television?
I have talked to his aides. We talk to the cabinet officials every week about going on television. So that interacted. Did the secretary and I joke once in a while? Sure. But I think that there is a degree of sensationalism, and I've never heard him swear in my presence, just to be clear. Okay. So that is not an accurate representation of what happened, no.
Coincidentally, he's in Afghanistan today. We just saw a video of that. The New York Times op-ed, also wanted to ask you about that, published this week, attacking Trump. Who do you think it was? I
don't know. I really don't. And I'll be interested because I do believe that at some point it's going to come out. Things in Washington don't seem to last that much of a secret for too long. And it'll be interesting in my mind to see what degree of senior administration official this is. I can't imagine anyone that I worked with writing this. And that's why I'm sort of amused by the degree to which someone may have been given senior administration status that wasn't that high up or really isn't. I don't know who it is. I think the person that did it is frankly a coward. If you don't like the president, don't work for him or speak out. But the idea of doing something like that, writing something of an attack of that nature in the New York Times and not being willing to put your name on it, I don't think it's helpful in any way. And I also just don't think it's helpful for the New York Times, not that they're in the business of taking my advice, but I've talked to a lot of reporters, and I think that this, granted it was on the editorial and opinion side, but for a lot of folks who don't necessarily understand that line and how to distinguish the news side from the editorial side, I think it continues to exacerbate this concern that people have with the media's coverage right now, especially of Trump, where you see this lack of objectivity, definitely on the opinion side of the House.
I want to get to the media in just a little bit, but with the Woodward book, the New York Times, other books that have been written, we've seen a lot of the people, the senior administration officials and others leave the White House, yourself included. Some have said that there's dysfunction. What do you attribute it to?
Well, first, I think that for most Americans, they're focused on results. So you look at the economy. Just today, another great jobs report came out showing another 200,000+ people are going to work. There's record low unemployment in multiple sectors of our society. The economic growth is at 4.2%, something that was laughed at just a year and a half ago. So for most Americans, I think they're focused on the results. Whether or not they like the policies or not, I think that's, and the palace intrigue is more for, I think, a lot of people who are looking to critique the president and the administration. He is not someone who is a politician. He didn't come into office with a cadre of political backers that had worked for him as governor or senator, which most of our previous presidents have. So there was a lot of people that I think were new, and some of it was churn. Some of it was the wrong fit. And some of it is just exhaustion. I mean, it's an unbelievably intense place to work under any administration. And for those of us who are on the campaign as well, going at that pace for the campaign, the transition, and then into the White House really takes its toll.
Did you see dysfunction at all while you were there?
I would never characterize it in that way. I don't think it's traditional. I think that, and again, I think at the end of the day, what really counts is the results. So the president's not as focused on the protocols and norms of how it was supposed to work. Mm-hmm. And for a lot of people who are used to things working the way it always has, I think that they want to label that dysfunction.
I do want to ask you about the media. Trump has repeatedly said that the media is the enemy of the people, are the enemy of the people. What's your take on that?
So I think that every industry, the media included, has good and bad. And that when you cast everybody with one broad brush, that you're throwing out the good with the bad. I think that, one, it's more effective to acknowledge the people who are doing a good job, and if you have a problem with a particular reporter or a story, to call that out specifically. I think that's a much more effective strategy. And then with the media writ large, I mean, I think as the beacon of democracy throughout this world, we need a free, robust press corps. That is essential to our democracy.
Do you think what's being said right now is really a hindrance to what's happening? I mean, between the media, between Trump and just kind of the American people?
I don't think that the current level of discourse throughout all of society is helpful. I think it's undermining our greatness and our ability to have civil and respectful discussions, where now people are, you almost have to pick a side and say, if the other side is less patriotic, they're racist, they're whatever, and we've lost the ability to have a civil, respectful discussion with our fellow citizen.
Do you think you were too harsh on the media?
Sometimes, sure. I mean, I think, and going back to the book, there are plenty of instances where I screwed up. I'll be the first one to admit it. But I think that it's a two-way street. And I think that one of the critiques that I have of a lot of folks in the media is that there are plenty of times when there's a screw up and it's less there's less willingness for the media to call out their own faults. And I think that's part of the problem, is that if we want one side to fix it all, it's never going to happen. It's got to be a conscious effort where we all recognize that we can all do a better job. When you look at the coverage of this president in particular and see that the last study had 92% of the coverage negative, while the press is supposed to be tough and tenacious, that number seems a little out of whack for an objective press. With the economy that we have, to say that 92% of the coverage of the president is negative doesn't really seem in keeping with where it should be. And I think when you look at past presidents and past administrations, it's way out of whack.
I could go on and on with you about that, but we're quickly running out of time, and I can't let you leave without asking you about Saturday Night Live and Melissa McCarthy.
Well,
and
you could.
I know, but I'm not going to.
Okay.
And I want to play just a little clip from the many clips
Oh, good.
From that.
Because I'm not here to be your buddy. I'm here to swallow gum, and I'm here to take names.
So, I mean, for people that might not know, do you chew a lot of gum?
I did. I chew much less now.
And I know you said you never do it at a press briefing as well.
No, I don't.
What's your take on Melissa McCarthy portraying you?
Well, I think she's an unbelievably talented actor. And, in that particular case, that first skit was somewhat well-deserved and funny. There were a couple others that I don't think were as funny as much as they were mean. But I mean, she's an actor.
Yep.
She's playing a part. It's not like her fault that, but so I think that it's one thing I can laugh at some of my own mistakes, and I think if you're in this game, you don't have a sense of humor and you can't take a joke, you're in the wrong game. But I do think that in a lot of cases, the comedy has crossed the line into being really mean-spirited, and that's unfortunate. Again, going back to this place that we are in society where we can't just tell jokes anymore without it being really personal and mean.
Have you had any conversations with her?
No.
Maybe you will in the future. One last thing, the Easter Bunny.
Yeah.
I know, at least I think you played it at one point at the White House?
Under the Bush administration, yes.
Okay, but you never came back during the Trump administration
No,
and played it. I see you there.
I think it was fun to do during the Bush administration. I think I'll let someone else do that going forward.
Sean Spicer, I encourage people to read your book. Thank you so much for stopping
Thanks
by
for
the
having
program.
me. You
Appreciate it. And coming up next, former President Barack Obama returns to the campaign trail with some fiery rhetoric for Republicans. What he had to say and President Trump's response.